is that if you die for something you know to be true, or if you died for something, therefore it has to be true because you knew it.
I never said that.
But that's what you're saying.
I'm simply, no, it is not what I'm saying. You're not listening. What I said was, study psychology and you will find out that people will not die in order to cover up what they know is a lie.
Yeah, but that's not the only
No, you're twisting words here. They
I'm not.
believe it to be true.
I'm straight as can be with you.
Just because they believe it doesn't make it true.
I never said that.
The exchange quickly escalates into a direct challenge about truth and sincerity. One side argues that dying for a belief does not automatically make that belief true. The other pushes back, insisting the argument is being mischaracterized. The focus shifts from emotion to psychology. Would anyone willingly sacrifice their life for something they knew was false? Or does that willingness strengthen the credibility of their testimony? The discussion moves toward historical evidence and the reliability of eyewitness claims. Let's dive in.
I was wondering if there's any documents about the 500 that saw Jesus rise after crucifixion.
Yes.
Or any proof outside of Paul.
The document that records that Jesus appeared, risen from the dead to over 500 people, was written 20 years after the events, in about 50, 51, 52 AD, by the Apostle Paul. He writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 3 through 8, "What I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised from the dead according to the Scriptures, that he appeared to over 500 people, most of whom are still living."
I just wonder if there's anything outside of the Bible, because some people will reject that the Bible is 100% true, and you could say that, Paul's kind of made that up to a point.
Okay, why would Paul make that up?
To justify what he's doing.
What was he doing?
To justify the church that he was building. Because historically, churches are quite a moneymaker. As far as Mormon church, Catholic church.
I thought Paul died being beheaded.
He did. I was just curious if there's anything written anywhere else about the 500, that's all.
Well, why, if he could have saved his life by denying the lordship of Christ, if he could have saved his life by denying the resurrection, why would Paul insist that Jesus had risen from the dead and lose his life for it?
I was just curious.
Why? That'd be some pretty screwed up thinking, wouldn't it?
True.
What did Paul have to gain from insisting that Christ had risen from the dead? Was there any financial profit?
Not at that point.
No? That's exactly right.
power.
Power? What power?
Well, to get the masses to follow him.
Paul wasn't getting the masses to follow him.
Well, for one thing, too, how is it interpreted, too? Because we could write any book, and then 10 years later, somebody could edit it and rewrite it just to make it sound good in their end. And it's the same thing as how we interpret the Bible, to make it sound good in our end, just to collect the masses to believe in what we have to say.
I think the evidence is, ma'am, that although people will die for a lie, they will die believing that that lie is true. I think if you study psychology, you'll realize people will not die to cover up what they know to be a lie. Just look at Watergate. 3 brilliant American lawyers, Dean, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman, were not willing to go to prison to cover up what they knew to be a lie, the Watergate scandal. How much more unlikely for a first-century dude named Paul to be willing to die to cover up what he knew to be a lie, the resurrection of Christ. Doesn't make sense.
Maybe it's all just symbolic. His writings were all symbolic. We just don't interpret it. Throughout the thousands of years, we haven't interpreted, really. We just interpret what we feel like interpreting. So therefore, it might be just very symbolic. Everything written back then, it's not plain English.
Maybe he was on an acid trip, ma'am.
Yeah.
Maybe he did shrooms. Anything's possible.
Anything.
But the overwhelming evidence is the Apostle Paul clearly taught the physical, bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, and he clearly taught the physical resurrection of all who put their faith in him. You cannot mistake that from what he wrote. So, and it's not just a matter of interpretation. Maybe Paul was a Nazi. No, the evidence is he was not a Nazi. Maybe he was a Republican. No, the evidence is Paul was not a Republican. You got to follow the evidence. You can't just say, well, maybe. Clearly, the dude wrote, Christ rose from the dead, we saw him, and if you put your faith in him, he's going to give you a resurrection body when he returns a second time. Now, maybe he was an idiot, but that's what he wrote.
The Apostle Paul was on the road to Damascus when he had a vision
Good
of
point.
Jesus, just like how Muhammad had a vision of the Archangel Gabriel.
Good point.
He's not an eyewitness.
Exactly. Paul was not an eyewitness, but Paul met so many of the eyewitnesses. It's incredible. Those 500 people he's talking about were the eyewitnesses. You're absolutely right, not Paul. And you're right. I do not base my faith in Jesus Christ on Paul's ecstatic experience on the road to Damascus.
But who are these eyewitnesses? What are their names? What are
Matthew, Mark, Luke,
Luke and John.
John, Peter, James, Thomas, Bartholomew.
So you're talking about the Gospels then, the Gospel writers.
And
Correct?
those who wrote other documents in the
And
New
those who wrote other
Testament.
documents. But we don't even know if the Gospels are written by those people. They don't have on the Gospels any proof they are written by the alleged, followers of Jesus.
Oh, well, what I would love for you to do is help me now. What kind of proof are you looking for in order to understand who wrote a document?
Actual historical evidence. If you look at history and the way we determine history, when Plato wrote about Socrates' trial, he made reference to himself being there. It was, I saw this. The Gospels use literary tactics employed by fictional writers. They talk about Jesus when he was by himself. How would they know that? How would they know Jesus was in the desert being talked to by Satan if they weren't there?
He told them.
When? What did it say he told them?
Well, obviously, if you're living with a guy, he can tell you about what happened
Did it
when you
say
weren't
he
with him.
told them?
Pardon?
If it's a historical writer, you're not going to say that happened unless you're going to make reference to the fact that he was told this by Jesus. And even then, it's just an account given by one person. Like, I don't understand. How is that history? You have
Well,
to
it's
have
real
an
simple.
eyewitness.
If someone wants to write a biography on me, I tell them what I did. And that's legitimate history.
That's legitimate history, but that's what all the religions do. Muhammad came and said that he saw the Archangel Gabriel and was pulled into heaven. Is that literal history?
Yeah, that's an historical claim Muhammad made. Do you think Muhammad didn't live?
No, Muhammad did live.
Oh, thank you. Why do you believe that?
Because we have eyewitnesses who saw Muhammad. And we have,
Very good. And
we
we have
don't have
eyewitnesses who
eyewitnesses
saw
of Jesus.
Jesus.
We have a guy who claimed that he talked to people that saw Jesus, and a guy who said he saw Jesus on the road to Damascus. There's not a single contemporary source from the life of Jesus. Even you admit it was 20 years after the fact. There is no written document, despite the great darkness following Jesus' crucifixion, despite the huge trial he had. There is not a single written document from that time that makes reference to Jesus. They're all after the fact.
From what time are you referring to?
From the life of Jesus. From
You
his
mean while he was
born-
sucking wind on earth?
While he lived until he died. There is not a single document that makes reference to him that entire time. There was none written at that time.
So what?
So what? That's why I'm saying it's not historical. The earliest
You
record.
gotta be kidding me. Then you're defining history as the document that was written while the person lived?
For the most part, you have to have credible evidence. You have to have
Oh, yeah?
artifacts.
You've
You have
just
to have-
wiped out all of ancient history, sir. You've just wiped out all of
We
Greek
have
history from
actual
Herodotus.
physical evidence that there were people there. We have eyewitnesses. We have an eyewitness of Socrates. We have artifacts from.
You just have wiped out all of ancient history. Congratulations.
How?
Herodotus did not witness all of the Greek history he wrote about.
A lot of it is considered fictional. We don't consider Homer's writing about Odysseus to be true. That's
And why not?
Because he employs fictional tactics. He wasn't
Very
there.
good.
Just
He
like the
employs,
Gospels.
what specifically does he employ?
He talks about things where he wasn't there to witness. He talks about magical
That's not the
events.
point. No, sir, that's
He
not the
talks
point. The
about-
point is he uses the literary style of epic poem. That's what the
All right.
Iliad is. That's what the Odyssey is. That's Homer's writing.
Right.
But Herodotus recorded a lot of Greek history that he didn't see, and that doesn't mean it's fallacious just because he didn't see it or write it when it happened. And if you think that we have writings of every battle that occurred that we know occurred because some dude was writing while the battle occurred, come on, give me a break.
We can find tons of reliable sources. All we have is the Christian community saying this happened.
That's false.
What else do we have? Josephus was plagiarism. That is taken out of most contemporary.
That is one passage out of Antiquities you're referring to. He refers to Jesus in many other passages in Antiquities that are not interpolations, and you know that if you've studied it. Secondly, the Mishnah includes a ton of hostile references to Christ by the enemies of Christ. They call him a false prophet. Thirdly, the Roman historians Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger all wrote about Christ as an historical person.
Did they write he was the Messiah and the Son of God and that he rose again?
They write that he was believed to be.
That he was believed to be, so it's a cult. Where do you have
That's
a non-
obviously what the
where do you have a
accusation was in the
non-Christian
first
source that says he
century
rose
by
again?
many people, that these Christians were a cult.
Where do you have a
That's historically accurate.
So where do you have a non-Christian source that said he rose again from the dead?
Oh, I see. What I hear you saying is, in order for you to believe that Jesus rose from the dead, you have to have an eyewitness who saw him risen from the dead who didn't believe in him.
Well, we're talking about magic here, so it has to be pretty credible. I mean, no one can say, even if there was someone who claimed to be an eyewitness who read at that time, I probably still wouldn't believe it because there's no contemporary events we can use to compare it to say that could actually happen.
Matthew saw Jesus risen from the dead.
We
Mark
don't know.
saw Jesus risen from the dead.
We don't know.
John saw Jesus risen from the dead. They all saw Jesus risen from the dead, and they wrote what they
They were
saw.
his followers. All of Muhammad's followers saw him do magical things and communicate with God. They were his followers.
So, you think I'm legit in saying Muhammad never lived
Muhammad
because
did.
the only people who wrote about Muhammad were his followers?
No, you're not only arguing that Jesus lived, you're arguing that he was the Son of God and that he rose from the dead and had powers beyond a normal human.
No. I'm arguing that that is what the historical evidence points to. I'm pleading with you, be open-minded and read the historical evidence for yourself. Do not take it from me.
And a good deal I have, not all of it. I'll contend that.
Good. Well, then you know that the historical evidence in the Gospels is that Jesus really did die and he really did rise from the dead.
In the Gospels, but again, the Gospels employ tactics used by fictional writers. They're written
Like
after
what?
the fact.
What?
I told you, they talk about Jesus in third person. They don't
Sir,
make reference.
every newspaper account is written after the fact. Just because a document is written after the fact doesn't mean it's not historically reliable.
Talking decades after the fact, and we don't even know the Gospel's authors. We do not know the authors of the Gospel.
We absolutely do.
How?
The early church fathers, Clement, Bishop of Rome, Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, wrote about John, Matthew, Mark, Luke.
Why doesn't the document itself say this was the writer?
I don't have the foggiest idea.
So the church is telling us these Gospels.
No, not the church.
You just mentioned the church.
Clement is not a church. Clement's a person. Papias was a disciple of John. Papias walked around with the Apostle John. He was an eyewitness of John, and he verified what John said.
So where's the non-Christian source that said Jesus rose from the dead? But you can't list the Gospels because those are Christian sources.
I just told you. Roman historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger,
So they said he was
talk
the Messiah
about...
and then he rose from the dead.
No! They don't believe he rose from the
But you're
dead.
asking me to take a leap of faith on this. You're asking me not only to believe Jesus existed, they're not Christians. They don't say Jesus rose from the dead. They said he was the leader of a cult or that he had a lot of followers, just like a lot of other religious people,
Right.
groups will say stuff like that about. So I don't understand where this leap of faith, or where I'm supposed to place faith in this if you can't find me a historical source saying that he had these powers.
You have people who say, I saw Jesus risen from the dead, and they died for it.
And they were his followers.
They died for what they claim to have seen. Study psychology. You will not have people die to cover up what they know is a lie. If they did not see Christ risen from the dead, then they died for what they knew to be a lie.
The sole axiom for this argument is that if you die for something you know to be true, or if you died for something, therefore it has to be true because you knew it.
I never said that.
But that's what you're
But
saying.
I'm simply, no, it is not what I'm saying. You're not listening. What I said was, study psychology and you will find out that people will not die in order to cover up what they know is a lie.
Yeah, but that's not the only thing.
You're twisting words here.
No, I'm not.
Believe it to be true. Just because
Straight as can be with you.
they believe it doesn't make it true.
I never said that. I never said that
Personally-
something is true because someone believes it.
I believe the Old Testament and New Testament were written by humans, but will I die for that? I can't prove that, can I? No, I can't.
Sir, that's not my point. Now, you're smart enough to get my point. My point is simple. People will not die in order to cover up what they know is a lie. If Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John knew that Jesus had not risen from the dead, and they constructed this lie, they never would have died to cover up what they knew to be a lie.
They died because they believed it. It doesn't make it true. They believed it because they wanted to believe it.
No, they did not want to.
Well, I'm sure they did.
Wait, what about
All you got to do is read the Gospels. Read the Gospels. What happened to all those disciples when Jesus was arrested? Where'd they go? They tucked tail and ran for their lives. They were a bunch of cowards. They were not true mesmerized believers. They didn't believe. Christ was arrested,
According to their
they
own
tucked
writings.
tails, and ran.
According to their own writings, again, which is written by his followers. And again, employ tactics used by fictional writers.
You know, sir, it's my privilege to debate Muslims. I never would use your line of thinking in debating a Muslim. Just because followers of Muhammad record the Quran does not mean that the Quran is not reliable.
But it's biased.
Just because Jews record the Holocaust does not mean that the Holocaust never took place.
If a neo-Nazi...
History and Holocaust.
What are you getting so upset about, ma'am? Why are you so upset?
Okay, it's not a big
No, it's not okay. What's wrong with you, ma'am?
You can't do that. This is religion. This isn't a genocide.
Well, ma'am, you better start struggling with the fact that history is a legitimate form of knowledge. Be it the Holocaust, be it the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. We're talking history. And if Christ really did rise from the dead, you'd better put your faith in him.
This is a far-fetched secondary source based on telephone.
No, it is not.
Show me
Matthew
Matthew's
saw
children and the
Jesus.
descendants of Matthew's children. Let me talk to them. What their thousands of great-grandfathers said. Because somebody had to live.
Good. Now, great. There's an excellent example of what I'm talking about. You're rejecting Christ because you can't talk to the children of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Absolutely. Give me some real historical evidence.
Man, don't you realize what you're doing? You're putting together a totally unrealistic test. If I reject Herodotus's history of Greece because I can't talk to Herodotus's children and grandchildren, I am so intellectually biased and narrow-minded, it's scary.
We have so many more
The
artifacts.
veracity of Herodotus's history of Greece has nothing to do with me meeting in person and shaking the hand of Herodotus's descendants.
All right, hold on a second. I just want to...
I think you guys better hold on before you keep on emoting and digging a ditch for yourself to step
Allow me to
into.
put this in perspective, because we're moving around here. We're talking about a lot of different things. We don't have an artifact from the time of Jesus that we can trace directly to Jesus. We don't have a document written during the time of Jesus. We don't have a non-Christian source that can make reference to Jesus rising from the dead. What we have are Christian sources of Jesus' followers saying he rose from the dead, an act that we cannot witness in our current times. So you're asking me to take a leap of faith because Jesus' followers said something happened that has never happened again, or cannot be shown how it could happen scientifically, happened in an ancient time according to his followers. That is not enough for me to believe in it. That is not enough for me to put faith in something.
All right. Please prove to me that unless you can prove something scientifically, it's not true.
You're playing
If
flip.
there is an ancient reference to any other historical figure dying and rising from the dead because his followers said so, we would not believe in it.
Well, I'm different. I realize that the evidence is there is some type of supernatural God.
What evidence?
Therefore, because there is some type of supernatural God, this supernatural God can choose to perform a miracle, which is simply changing the natural laws that he created in the first place.
You have to believe in God in the first place to believe in God, because you have to believe in miracles before you can believe a miracle could happen.
You
Therefore,
have
believe
to
in God
acknowledge
believe in Jesus.
that there is a supernatural God before you can believe in miracles. That
If you
would
don't
be
believe in
absolutely
the
correct.
So wait, your argument's fallacious because you're asking us to believe in Jesus because of the historical evidence. But before you can believe in the historical evidence, you have to believe in God to believe in stuff that's magical. So I don't understand where that falls into place.
All right, it's real simple. You and I have presuppositions. You've got yours, I've got mine. One of our basic fundamental presuppositions is there a supernatural God or is there no supernatural God? Now, the reason that I'm convinced there is a supernatural God is because there's so much evidence pointing to God's existence.
What evidence?
What evidence? Good question. I'm glad you asked. Thank you. The order and the design of the cosmos points to an intelligent mind behind it.
How
Really?
does an
How
intelligent
is
mind, if that is true,
Tell me,
not?
how does the order point to that?
You bet. My brother is a transplant surgeon. He transplants kidneys and livers. He has studied the human body very carefully. There is order.
Okay.
When he transplants a kidney or a liver, it's because he knows what he's doing. It's not because he says, hey, let's rip the guy open and see what we can find.
That's science.
No, he has studied the order and the design of the human body.
Science.
That order and design is so intricate, it puts this wristwatch to shame. If you demand that I believe there's a watchmaker behind the wristwatch, and then you demand that I believe that the amazing order and design of the human eye and the central nervous system is a result of chance and fate, you lose me.
Not chance of fate,
Yeah,
it's natural
wait.
selection. That
Yeah.
is dictated by very
Natural
specific
selection
laws
is
of biology.
fate, sir.
You are
It's
implying
caused by mutation, natural selection, gene flow, and genetic drift. The 4 forces of evolution.
What thing? Wait,
Natural selection is fate.
you are implying that nature by itself cannot be ordered.
I am stating
It's-
flat
it's
out,
a very
my
arrogant-
experience
it's a
of
very
life
arrogant
is
comment to make.
that order never comes about by chance.
Why can't I don't understand why nature can't just be organized and beautiful the way it is. You're jumping to conclusions here. I mean,
No, I'm not.
But there's both.
Just give me an example outside of nature, because obviously nature is what we're debating right now. Give me an example outside of nature where order and design come about by chance.
by chance,
It's just always been there. I don't understand what you're saying.
it's just the way
You know, the
nature
Big Bang
is.
shows it's
Nature's
not
the way.
always been there.
It's the
No
way of
matter in
nature.
existence.
The universe is about 15 billion years old. The universe is not eternal. It's not always been there. That's antiquated.